Live now. Okay. And then I will start recording. And Sunny, you have the mic.
Right. Yeah, so hello everybody. Welcome to Tech School. My name is Sunny. I am the CEO and founder of Black Logics. Black Logics is geared towards aiding companies in the landscaping industry. So through customer discovery, we found that general contractors and subcontractors invest over 72 hours a week bidding projects only to find out that they can't perform due to budgeting or they have to drop out on the project because they have to undercut themselves. So at Black Logics, we connect these companies with producers of the materials, getting them prices as close to cost as possible, making them more competitive so that they can perform with confidence. And with that said, I pass it back on over to Curling.
Thanks, Sunny. And Sunny, you're Cal State San Marcos alumni, right?
I am.
That's good. That's great. That alumni stamp is like crucial, like all the time and tuition. Yeah, you got. That's a badge of honor. Um, Sam, Professor Clark, do you want to talk anything about Innovation Hub while we're on to, or anything that's coming up?
Yeah, we got a couple things coming up, but I'll just quickly talk about that innovation challenge that we're doing this semester. And it's a club-based challenge. So if you guys, for most of you, you're in the entrepreneurship class, what you'll want to do to participate in that is to join the Entrepreneur Society or one of the other organizations on campus. But what it allows us, or what's going on is we're looking for ideas to solve some specific concerns around sustainability, around water pollution and some environmental pollution concerns that our Office of Sustainability presented to us. And so it's an opportunity for you as a student to participate in solving those problems with your student organization. And in addition, there's a chance to win some prize money for that organization. I think the first prize is $1,000 and some runners up of $500 each. So help support your organization at the same time working on real problems in society. So anyway, if you have some questions, you can email me or innovation at csusm.edu.
That's great. I love that. I like when you guys have the themes too, Professor Clark. I like that. That always helps. Like at USC, we always had these like themes, like on social justice or something like that.
Yeah.
And you would bring other people into this entrepreneur space because they were more interested in like how can they help, right? Um, for now, a lot of people know my name is Curling. Think of it like the Olympic sport. I'm one of the founders of Fokcus. We help startups, and Joanna, she's a co-founder of Fokcus, also too. Very brilliant. Works with a lot of software teams, hardware teams, things of that nature. So when things came up last week, Joanna, when I explained like, hey, we're for the second season of Tech School, like what you want to hear, product came up a lot. And so I said, Joanna, let's just do a casual conversation on product. We can even talk a little bit about Fokcus. We're releasing our version 2 product, so that could be a really good case study for you guys can see like what does that look like, but even just how Joanna thinks. She thinks a little bit differently. Her thing is really high on communicating, right? Especially to engineers and people like Curling, who's the engineer. So Joanna, I'm gonna just pass over to you initially, and then I know we don't really have to even share a screen or not, but I know you might even show
I think I
some
have a
things.
few. I have a few props in
I think
my
a few
notebook
props, right?
that I'm
Yeah,
going to
nice.
share,
Yeah,
and I think maybe at the end, if there's enough time, I'll let you decide. We can show a little bit of our more formal process.
sure. I love that.
Um, but hi everybody, it's great to meet you. I see a lot of names that I don't recognize. So I'm Joanna, and I am one of the founders of Fokcus. And my strength is really in taking the idea from a visionary like Curling and translating it into something that's actionable, and then helping the team, shepherding them through the steps of executing it, and getting it, to a place where then I can hand it back to somebody like Curling, who then can convince everybody else that it's, or explain to everybody else why it's amazing, and then take back sort of this. So I'm sort of in the middle of like there was an idea, and then I do the middle part, and then somebody, sells it and gets the customers excited about it. Is that fair, Curling?
That's fair. Yeah. I always say like you're like extraordinary like project manager, but I always feel CEOs have to be a project manager a little bit, right? They at least have to kind of think like that a little, right?
Yeah. So I think I'm not sure. I always hesitate to just say project manager because I think people have different conceptions of what a project manager is. But that for sure is, a very appropriate title for what most of my activity, how I structure the way that I do things. So I wanted to kind of start with showing you a little bit about sometimes. So one of the things you may not know about me is also I really like to draw, and so I am often drawing out maps and icons and I don't know that I'm necessarily good at it, but I like doing it, and it fits with the way that I think. And so so in this notebook, I also have, cute little drawings.
I like that.
but I also have work things. So when we were starting with Fokcus and we were thinking about how could we talk, what's the most important thing to us and how could we talk to our development team to really get them to understand the vision? We started with this, and Carly and I worked on it for a very long time. Let me see if I can get it. Can you?
Yeah,
is it clear?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it has a matching engine.
So we said we wanted to be best in the world at matching. So number one, and that's supposed to be an engine in the middle, and that's an airplane going around the world, and also maybe a startup rocket, launching off. But we were trying to sort of encapsulate, the concept of what we wanted to do in just one image that people could maybe come back to. And I don't know that this has necessarily been useful for anything other than us working through the idea ourselves. There were a lot of iterations before we got to that. And then as we matured and as we sort of created a vision for, what we could do with our best in the world matching engine, I love to create, can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
It's a mind map where I start in the middle here. Here's our, see the little first place ribbon for the best in the world matching engine. And then I just draw links off of it with bubbles of like, what are the possible products? And I try to group them by customer. So I say, like, if I'm a university, maybe I want to do all these things. And if I'm a VC, maybe I want to do these things. And I'm not looking at the picture. So don't, they're not real correlations. But it's sort of this scribbly brainstorm of how we think about, where we're going with the project. Sometimes we do a time-lapse video of sketching this out. And then we can actually talk through it with the team or even just with each other. What were you thinking about when you said this or when you thought about this? Another thing you can see in here is initially we were thinking about, you see the stethoscope, we were initially thinking about us as sort of doctors for startups, right? And we were thinking about analogies of, a study and a checkup and things like that. And we've moved away from that a bit, but conceptually, but we were playing around with some of those things and seeing if we could make all of the pieces of our organization kind of fit together.
I think we did keep the health of the company, right? So of our assessment.
We did.
Yeah.
And I think all these core concepts are still in our business. This idea, we said it was Fokcus University. I think it became tech school, right?
Yeah.
And we had this idea of a checkup that has become our assessment, right? And we have classes and workshops. We're in a different zone than Fokcus University. Then maybe that was Fokcus Founders Group, but it's kind of morphed into tech school. We had an app, and so anyway, there are a lot of things in here that we conceptually have maintained. So they were good, core ideas. They just have different product names and different themes and different analogies around them now. Do you want to talk about that anymore, Curly?
Oh, I think the one thing that came up even with the cohort that people like to sketch, right? Yeah. People like to doodle and sketch, and I think that works well for founders. If you can actually doodle or something of that nature.
You put this in your journal for sure.
Exactly.
Do a 2-page spread and just put it in your journal. Just total brainstorm. I can show you another one too. For a company that was a little further along. This was sorry, that's really loud. This was the small manufacturing company that I did, but that I had where the idea was more clear, and you can see it's a little more organized where I actually have drawn the map, but I have lists underneath, and I actually have like a little logo for each of the parts of the business. But it's still the same kind of idea of like, okay, my business is at the center, and these are all the spokes of my business, and how I sort of think about organizing the products and services. And then I can use this to say, like, which of these things fit together that I want to focus on first. Like, it can sort of help you see, like, if you can find things in common between different segments of what you want to build, you can see like, okay, it makes sense to do this group of things together because they complement each other instead of just working on them randomly.
Joanna, we do have a lot of solopreneurs. We did this process together, right? Like
we did.
You were
well,
drawing it.
This one I did by myself.
Okay, got it.
No,
okay.
but the other one we did, and then I showed you that one, and I said, this is how my brain works. Like, can we try to do this together? But yeah, it can totally work as a solopreneur or together.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Even some of our groups now have just got an engineering team from USC. Would you suggest even that process with that team on a part, or make it a smaller scale?
I think this is more like the executive team, or you and a mentor. I have another one that I did with a mentor when I was trying to flesh out an idea and I couldn't articulate all the pieces of it. And I said, let me just draw a map. And then and then eventually what I did with that one was I took all the pieces of the map and I put them on 3x5 cards so I could sort them and we could rearrange them. And so you can copy pieces of it out, and you can lay them out on a whiteboard, or you can
sticky notes,
spread them out on the floor. You can turn them into sticky notes, but it lets you move them around, and then maybe you turn it back into a presentation or something. But if you're the kind of person that likes to write things down and likes to doodle and sketch, then like taking yourself offline, not having to, so you just think about what it is that you want to think through, rather than also navigating, like, how do I make the tool do the thing that's in my head?
Good. Now, can we fast forward even to still using the sketch idea, right? This is all non-tech, but showing maybe an engineer, like maybe how something might look, how you come up with that process?
So, but I had a question for you before we jump there. This is my process, and I don't think it was a process that you had necessarily done before. What was it like for you to try to like it's hard to take like this abstract thing in your head and give it to another person. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it took me some time, but the one great thing is that it was purely visual. So I always remember that engine, like we're going to be a matching engine, matching mentors to mentees, or matching someone to a curriculum. I knew that engine was something I always would tell people that like we have this engine that we're creating, right? So that helped me out the most, to be honest, Joanna, that we had this engine behind. And usually when I think about engine, it's software, right? So it helped me out a lot.
Okay, so then once we figured out what pieces we're going to work on, should we pause and see if anyone has questions, or you want me to keep going?
I feel like in general in the audience, if anyone has questions, can you put it in chat and we actually can get to it? That's totally fine. I've been monitoring chat and things of that nature, so I'll monitor chat. And if we get some questions, we can talk about that too.
That's sort of a very early stage activity when you're like, you have your core idea, you think you're ready to build something, you need to talk about what is it going to be and how big is it going to be and which parts are you going to work on first. And then we had, I think, a session early last year where we talked about making a project charter.
Sure.
And I think that's a good next step after you do this. Like you do this, you kind of sort it all out, you prioritize it, you talk with your mentor or with your partner, and then you figure out what's important to work on first. So you create this project charter, and then once you have your project charter and maybe you have some people that you're going to work with, or you're just managing yourself, you can build a schedule. And I know we had a session last year about building a schedule as well. So that's a good next step. But then once you have this is your whole plan, you still have to communicate to people exactly what you need them to build. And communicating them to, I want a best in the world engine, is not enough information. So they need to actually find a way to see a picture of what you like. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what you want it to look like, but it needs to be if you could find 3 things that look kind of like what you want to build, and now we're talking just about building software currently, so that most of you are have a software component to your startups. So the next step that I do is I go online and I search for templates, and I just look around at websites that have the core functionality of the things that I want to do. What does it look like to create an account on LinkedIn? What does it look like to create an account on Facebook? What does it look like to create an account on, on Twitter or Instagram? Like very common sites that people use a lot, where, they've had, they have huge teams that have invested a lot of money in picking their colors and fonts and figuring out what the user experience is like. And they might think of things that you might not think of. And so just sort of exploring a little bit. And then I look at sort of aesthetically what I like, and I find sites or templates that fit what I like, and then I check it with curling, and I say, like, here's kind of what I find appealing, and I think this would work for our thing. What do you think? And then once we're aligned, I actually do this, where I find an example page. Is it clear? Is it dark enough to see it? So great. So I find an example page that I like, and I actually take the concepts and I sketch them into what it would look like for us. And so you can see, I'll slide it up a little bit, that sometimes this is enough to give your dev team, especially early on when you don't have a sense of what colors you want. You just have the functionality. They can build it all in black and white. You don't have to put colors in yet. You don't have to make a decision about fonts. You can just use default fonts, and you can just think about, like, functionally, how is it going to work? What kind of stuff do you want in each screen? And as you start to build this and work with your developers to build it, they'll ask you questions like, well, what happens when they click on that? Or where is this supposed to go? And what happens if that doesn't work? Or where is this data supposed to come from? And there are things that you might not have thought through, because if you're not a developer or you haven't been through development projects before, you might not realize that that's important information to provide your developers. Later, when you're a very mature organization, you'll have project managers, you'll have technical directors, you'll have like, I think they're called functional analysts, where they actually listen to requirements and they translate them into a document, and the technical person looks at them and turns that into, like, you're going to use this language, and you're going to, we're going to build this many screens, and they talk about the technology and these are the assets we're going to need. You'll have graphic designers. So later you'll have a whole team of people that actually break all this down and figure this out. But you will have already built the framework, and they're just riffing, if you will, on this core concept that you've built. And sometimes they'll say, like, you know what, we've gotten a lot of feedback and we need to revamp the whole thing. So maybe conceptually all the things will still be there, but they'll look completely different, or they'll be organized in a different way. But this basic framework works for, very, very early stage startups. It also works for you if you don't have a dev team. It works for you to think through, like, here, I know I want to display some graphs. Can I find a free plugin that's really easy to use that lets me show graphs? Or is there another tool that I can just have a link to that will let me do this? And so you can think through, like, what are the pieces of information that you want to have on your screens? And you can find hacks that don't require dev teams that allow you to piece those things together. And I wish it was, go ahead.
And John, I know you offhand always use Excel, right? So when we're looking at, like, reports, we kind of
I just build everything in Excel first. Exactly. Yeah. And really that, the hack can be that, like, you take your data and every night you manually take a screenshot of your Excel and you update your website, and the next day it's refreshed. Like, you can do it completely manually. It doesn't have to be fancy from the beginning. It just needs to be useful enough for your customers to want to pay for it.
Yeah, I was even saying too, John, like, it wouldn't even have to be that, more like behind the scenes. You're just using Excel and you're talking with customers on what that data looks like.
Right. And if you're just providing consulting services, or if the tool is for you to use internally, you can totally use Excel. But if you wanted to create a report or do it, have it on your website, you can hack it. It doesn't have to be live functionality. It can be pieced together.
I was thinking about that because Stuart earlier was talking about business intelligence.
Yeah.
Like you can do a lot with
You
Excel
can.
offhand to give that intelligence to someone, and then
Yeah.
as you get more mature and you can try to do something consumer facing,
Yeah.
try to have these kind of plugins like
Yes.
some of the things that we found out to do focus.
And Ganesh and I did a talk last year where we talked about how I developed the algorithm for us in Excel, and then we worked together and created an understand like a white paper to help him understand what the pieces were, and then he talked a bit about how he implemented it and understood it.
Yeah.
So I think, for sure, Excel can be a powerful tool. And words like algorithm, I know, can be a little intimidating, but really, it's just like algebra, right? It's a formula. And so what you need to figure out is what are the important pieces of information that you want, that are critical to decision making in your business or for providing information to your customers, and then track that information and then figure out what you can do with it. And that's absolutely how we started, is just we think this information is going to be useful, so we're going to collect it from a lot of people, and then once we have a lot of information, we're going to figure out what could we do with it.
I love that. Now, that piece from the mind kind of mapping to like actually having some like, hey, this is what the user experience kind of looks like.
Yeah.
As you got closer to that, it got easier for me as an engineer, right? Because I know,
Yes.
like, hey, you're looking
Right.
at Facebook. You look kind of like how Facebook look. Okay,
Yes.
let me use those colors. Facebook
Right.
always uses blue. Let me
Yeah.
use that, and then that actually helps me when I'm actually looking at templates. Like, Joanna really likes Facebook. That's really that blue. Let me
Not
use
actually
that blue.
true.
Yeah. Or Joanna actually likes using Pinterest. That's maybe
True.
more true. There's colors there, right? So that helped me out more. You just give me examples of things that you like to
Yes.
use every day as kind of like, okay, I know Joanna's going to kind of like this kind of interface because
Yeah.
Pinterest looks like this.
Yes. And actually, I think that's a good reminder, because I think we do that often where I'll be using a site that's totally for managing your refrigerator inventory, or for doing genealogy research, or, for hunting for, kindergarten curriculum for our kids. And so I think I often come to you and say, like, you know what, I really love their account setup process, or I really love this small piece where you upload a photo and then you can manage it. Right. And so
Yeah.
I often, and then I'll bring that to, once Curling says, you know what, I get it. If he says, like, I don't get it, or I don't see how it fits, then we don't try to, like, if we can't conceptually agree on it, we don't bring it to the dev team. We bring it to the dev team after we've talked about it and said, like, okay, yeah, that does really make sense. I think we could build something like that, or even use that tool, or use, and Curling's really good at, he's like, I'm going to go on their site and figure out how they did it. Right.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
goes and looks at the code, and which you can sort of have a peek at through a browser if it's a web-based system. And he does a little research online to see if he can even figure out how they did it. So maybe we learn about some plugin or some tool that is really useful that they're using that we can then use too.
Yeah. I think engineers are always curious. So if we see something like, oh, wow, like Netflix does this really great thing here. Like, what do they use? So we'll research what that is.
Yeah.
So.
We did do an interim, in our process, we did an interim step between, when we developed the basic concept to when we did this. And
True.
and I used a tool before I started doing this. This is more comfortable for me. This is much faster and much easier for me to do than to build this, in a tool. I know other people have different preferences. I think we've heard Elliot and Kyle talking a bit about
Figma.
user experience and about Figma and tools, and they are so fast at doing those things. And I know, Carlin, you've worked with Emily, and she's very fast at, she uses another system. Do you remember what it's called?
Oh yeah, Adobe X. That's
yeah,
all these
exactly.
Kind of
but she's very fast. She can make the changes completely on the fly, like during a meeting. That's ideal, right? If you sit in our dev meetings and you see me try to make the changes live, I'm just not that proficient in the tool yet. I think I could get there if I put a lot of time into it, but I can do it faster on paper. And so we did a little hybrid where I took the time to create a couple of screens completely that showed all of the navigation, all the structure of what our site would look like in the tool called Figma. And I found templates that helped me do that. And then once we had that in place, then I just looked for models of other things that we could adapt. And now the developer has our lead developer has a very clear idea of what I want it to look like, what the look and feel should be. And so when I give him a sketch like this, he understands to reference the stuff that we created in Figma and piece those two things together. And that's working for us. You may have a developer that likes things more polished. You may have a developer that, or you might have a developer's like, got it, I'm running, right?
John, you mentioned Figma a couple of times. I don't know if you have access.
I do.
You want to pull it up?
Let me see if it's logged in.
So me going to school as an engineer, a lot of times I work with other groups to do things, and they would use tools like Figma to actually illustrate what Joanna does, like on her kind of sketching, right? It was easier. So I learned those, Joanna, because I'm not really good at sketching, because this is just
and I'm not that good at it either.
Track and dropping. And but it helped me out a lot more, even as a developer. Like, oh wow, that looks great. And even we use these things like these templates, right? I think you when you pull it up,
I'll show you that. Give me just a second. It's not logged in, so I gotta look up the password.
No problem.
Go in my password vault.
While you're doing that, Professor Clark, while Jonah's kind of pulling these things out, any feedback on what you've learned about at least what product and things of that nature?
Well, one thing that Joanna showed is I actually really like the sketching part of it all, and that's because I think it just allows you to be exercise a little bit more of the creative part of your brain.
Yeah.
And creativity is what's going to lead to innovation, because it's about thinking about things differently. And as we draw, we kind of exercise that part of our brain that says, hey, we're thinking about things a little bit differently, and we're forcing ourselves to draw, even if we're not good at it, right? It doesn't have to be a good drawing, but it allows us to think about things differently. And then also when we review those, one of the great things you could say is you might not even remember what that's supposed to be because that drawing was so bad. But it might trigger another thought and way of thinking about that problem that you're trying to solve. But we really need a lot more, and this is, I think, emphasized in Joanna, is those early stages, the creativity part of it. You have these mind maps where we're thinking or brainstorming up lots of different ideas in hopes that we find the one good idea, right? We're likely to only have a couple small good ideas in a big brainstorming session, and I think that's ideal. Most founders, most of their ideas are pretty bad. Yeah. They're successful because they've had lots and lots of ideas, and they finally found the one that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's true. If you look through my notebook, that's true. Like I have lots and lots of those maps of different ideas and different configurations of ideas for different business ideas, and it just felt good to sort of flesh it out and pretend it was a real company, and what all would it do, and what would the teams look like, and then sometimes you're like, you know what, that actually is terrible, right?
And then I like the idea of we move. I always say a lot about entrepreneurship is organizing chaos. So you're moving from those mind maps into more organized processes and systems, because when you're going to launch a business, you gotta move into those. What Joanna's getting to, this product development. It's a whole system. It's a whole process where you're working with people and resources, and you have to communicate those things to each group. And if it's just kind of chaos, nobody knows what's going on, and so everything becomes systematized.
And the bigger it becomes, the more structure you need, because there are more people who you need to keep busy all day, every day. And so you really need to have a lot of documentation and procedures in place so that they all understand what they're supposed to do and what their constraints are, without you having to draw maps for them, because you can't do that when you have 1,000 employees and 5,000 employees and 10,000 employees.
And one other thing that I would suggest as a founder, so one of the challenges, and you guys might talk to this a little bit, is that entrepreneurs typically like to tinker.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you like to change things. Yeah. As you get to start down a certain point along the product development process, you need less and less tinkering and changing, and
it costs more to do it.
Yes. You need to get out, you need to start launching products and getting feedback. And yes, you might need to pivot, and you might need to, but what we always find with founders is you'll get something going, and then the next thing that you want to do is go after a different market or a different customer, or go after this or go after that. The worst is to change your product for every customer you run into. That's like kind of some of the worst product management. But we have a habit as entrepreneurs to, in a sense, try to tinker and change things. And we used to say to founders, don't fix what's not broken.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You gotta run through these things, build them, develop them, and try not to
Get feedback.
Yeah. Try not to change everything all the time.
And I think I think it's especially hard if you've worked in sort of a corporate environment where the goal is to get it perfect or as close to perfect as possible, right? And where the goal is not to put something out there to just get feedback on it. You know, when in a very mature organization, often you're like, I can't damage my reputation. I can't, put something out that has failures or problems and in some businesses it's okay to do that, but like in a hospital, you probably don't want to do that. Or in the airline industry, the airplane's pretty good, so it matters a lot more later on than it does earlier on. But if you've come from that environment, you've been trained, and you might not realize it to think that way. And you need to sort of break yourself out of that. And you need to remember the context of I'm working on a startup, and I should put things out that are, that are not 100% there, because I need to know if this is connecting with my audience.
Yeah, I remember Michael Siebel from Y Counter saying, like, if you're putting out things out in the world that you're not embarrassed, then you waited too long. You gotta be embarrassed. You gotta put it out there.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know you're gonna show Figma offhand. We have about 5 minutes to kind of go over the last pieces, Joanna.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll
I'll
open
just
up the
show it
Q&A.
real quick. Share screen, and share screen 2. Share. Okay, so you should be able to see Figma now.
Yes.
And not my email.
Correct.
Perfect. Let me close some of this stuff down. So this is Figma. It's basically like a giant whiteboard. It works a little bit like Photoshop if you've used that before in terms of layers, but I'm just going to show you what we did with it rather than how to use it. And Curling, if you want to have an expert come back and talk to us about how to use it,
we can unpack
we can
it.
do that. So one of the things I did before we even started using Figma was I created this little guide based on so Curling found a website template, and I built all of our branding around the website template that Curling had picked. And this is our color palette. It's just a little guide that I gave our team, like if these are kind of topics that relate to each color, and like what the code is if they wanted to use this color in development, so they can match exactly all the other assets that we've been creating. And you'll see Curling has that painting behind him. Yes. Scoot to the side a little bit. That's our color palette, right? So some of our public facing documentation is mostly black, blue, and white, but our sort of internal stuff and the things that we use, with some of our customers, especially if you go search the content on our blog or the thumbnails on our YouTube, you'll see more of the color palette being used. So I took our website and I just took a screenshot of it, and I had intended actually to build out more information about the website, and then we started working on the actual system. So what I did was I took let me see if I can find a good example. Here you go. So we built this basic page. It has like a header. Sign up page,
right? That's the first thing we did.
Yeah, it's a sign up page. So there's a header, a footer, a box in the middle, what all the boxes are, how I want it to work. So there's these are called radio buttons. So it's that instead of a checkbox or a drop down, where I want the login to be. And then a bunch of notes about how we want it to function that are not actually part of the page. Just I had agreed, during the dev meeting, that these are the questions that the developer asked. And so I typed this up during the dev meeting. And then as we it kind of goes left to right in order of how we've been working on it. But then later we realized we needed some navigation up here. So then I I built this little piece out, and this sort of shows you that if you put your mouse over one of these things and hover, a little other menu pops up. And then we've added in this little chat bot. And then I had some specific icons that I liked, but the developer said there was a different library that worked better for him. And so I just went through his library and found comparable icons, and then gave him the codes for the icons to make it very easy. So here's the color code, here's the code to the icon that I like, and then some general instructions about, how I want this functionality to work. And then here you can see a more complex page where we've built out, what do the questions look like? And then we started to look at a model for what does it look like on the web, and then what does it look like in a mobile view. So you can see that we've kept our content narrow in the middle, because we think a lot of people may be accessing the site through a mobile. And we wanted to make sure that all of our designs sort of lent themselves well to being, squished into a narrow column. And then here you can see that we've actually started to go further afield, where I still have the basic framework and I'm telling him what I want in here, but now I'm not telling him exactly what font I want. I'm not being particular about, does the gray and black all match? And I'm giving him these are actually just screen grabs from an Excel spreadsheet of like, would it be cool if we had this, or it would be cool if we had this? And I'd like it to go on this page somewhere. And so as we've worked together and built these pages and sort of come to a common understanding of what the user interface feels like, we've been able to go further afield. And I've been able to give him less and less information. And so it's been kind of a progression from that initial very detailed screen with specific fonts and a lot of instructions to then I can just show him like, here's a screen grab from a totally other site that I liked. And could you make it like ours? Or could you make ours like this?
Yeah.
Where we have this left navigation menu that we've been thinking about implementing and things like that. And then sometimes we see a design that we really like. So in my initial designs, I didn't have the white floating on gray. We decided we really liked that. And so we've implemented that in some spaces, and we decided it makes it easier to see some things.
But I like it, John, that it was all in one place. Like,
yeah.
You can just go to this link. You would give us a link, and we can just look at like your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, hey, here's a screenshot, and it was just one
Exactly.
place we can look at. So if we're working on it late night, okay,
Yes.
what's the color pink that Joanna likes?
Right, exactly.
So that's what helped me out, was like this really nice little.
And there's a lot of information actually in here. So this is all sort of templates of different pieces of a site that somebody might build that I pulled together from different places. And so now there's sort of this quick reference of, if I need to build out something, what's a model that we could use?
Those are samples, right?
Yeah. So this whole section is all samples. And I usually grab from here when we start building one of these.
Okay, got it.
But I do like that, it is web-based. Somebody else can access it. We can work asynchronously. If I can't make the dev meeting that week, I can still build the tool, and then, questions can come to me in Slack or by email. And we've been good about working this through. And now I can kind of give the developer sort of big chunks of things. And then now on Fridays, he kind of shows me what he built. And then we talk about like, this could be a little bit more like this other thing, or this is great. It's great for now. Later, we want to think about building out these other things.
That's great, John. And what I wanted, I guess in a lot of ways, I wanted to open up to some questions. I didn't get any on the chat offhand. I did see Sunny saying, you should see my whiteboard. I feel like Sunny uses the whiteboard to do mind mapping and stuff like that.
It's the same idea, but then you sort of, and you can use the whiteboard and take a picture of it. I think I have some pictures of us down in UTC with you and Matt, like drawing over an entire wall.
Yeah, you took pictures of it,
where
right?
I took pictures of it, and I think we did some similar things. So just some tools for you to, and processes for you to think through.
So John, I do feel like this could be like we can have a part 2, part 3, unpack some things offhand. Yeah. I do know that part of this is just a way we can communicate. Like you had this one way of communicate that worked well with our team. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can look at other ways to communicate too. I think there's some other ways we can kind of show groups, but
sure.
I'll open up the question. Sunny, I'm gonna put you on the spot offhand. Like Sunny, you had some questions for me earlier about what platform you wanted to use. Like Sunny was like, should I use WordPress? Those are actually even more detailed questions. But Sunny, offhand, any questions you had? Or
Offhand, no. Yeah, I love the doodles that Joanna was doing. I swear my whiteboard is insane. Like looks just like her sketch pad.
Yep, I love whiteboards too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and just like how Curly was saying, like, pictures of it. One thing that I did like that you said is taking those ideas and actually, putting them on cards, and kind of moving them around. I didn't think of that because normally I just take a picture of it and say, okay, I'm gonna put this idea up here.
Yeah.
Like I have a whole wall that I'm doodling on too. So like that actually I feel is better how you can like actually arrange the way that you can kind of make these ideas come about or materialize it.
Yeah.
I like that. Professor Clark, any final thoughts too? I mean, we kind of did this high level overview of what our process is with Fokcus. We want to kind of maybe unpack that as we learn more about what people kind of are understanding on product. Even Joanna said, should I do one how I do hardware? I said, okay, let's think about that too. But we went with the software route and web-based route just because some of the cohorts been doing that. But
yeah, I would just kind of add to a couple things. One, I mean, I really, because really this is, like you said, kind of part one, right? It's the planning up to the point of actually putting something into existence, right? So you've planned all the way up. You have your ability to communicate, and then it's really that next step. And I think that's what we go to is how do you execute it?
Yeah.
How do you get people to actually do it? And you hinted to some things, Joanna, a lot of times, and this is something that I think people who are not tech, in the tech space don't realize is there's a lot of stuff already built.
Yeah.
You don't need to go recreate and make stuff. There's a lot of things that you can plug and play. There's other people who've done stuff that, for example, Curling can go and look at, because most of that stuff is just, there's a lot of resources that already exist. And I think as a founder, having the understanding that you can get something out the door fairly quickly is useful in the software space. The hardware space may have a few other challenges, but again, there's probably some plug and play options or somebody doing something very similar that you can kind of add to, or et cetera. So I always just like to encourage entrepreneurs that when you've got to that point where you've planned out what you want to do and just start executing as quickly as possible. Get something going, because it's more motivating when you have a product ready for customers. Gets you excited, especially if they start paying for it, right? It makes, you feel good, like I'm accomplishing things. And so doing that as quickly as possible is what I always recommend.
Yeah. Sam, who's the student, Cal State San Marcos student, now he's probably alumni now, that was doing the brewery distribution, or?
Yeah, that was Jason.
Jason, yeah.
Yeah, Jason McBride.
I like Jason, how he had this hybrid solution. He was doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but he had the website ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was another example of building something from scratch. He learned how to build things from scratch, but at the same time, we used a lot of plug and play features just to get something up and going, and it worked out fairly well for what we needed. We actually realized we needed to spend less time custom building software because the features already existed that allowed us to accomplish what we were trying to do. Anyway, so that's a great example of getting something going fairly quickly.
And I think we can talk about this in another session too. But that the company that I showed you the mind map for with the little owl drawings on it, the whole customer experience was all pieces that I had plugged together. I didn't have a development team. I wasn't a developer, and I built something that I called the portal, which was it's like a single website that had links to other things. So you had to go to my website and then you went to my shopping cart, which was actually a different website, and a different place if you wanted to get my catalog, and a different place if you wanted customers, access to customer service, and a different place if you wanted, a message board, a different place if you wanted to look at product samples. It was like a forum and a gallery and a shopping cart. And there are lots of that was a few years ago. There are a lot of tools that integrate all of those things for you now, and it's easier. But that business did fine. It operated for 8 years or something with that pieced together system, and generated revenue, and and was adequate to run the business. And so you have to think about like how far you want to go. If you're not a software company, like how much effort do you want to put into building your software solution?
And I think a great example is it's all about creating value, and that's what
exactly.
And customers will put up with a lot of user interface challenges when the value is there. And
exactly.
I think the greatest example is Craigslist, right?
Yeah.
The simplest, it's just links.
Terrible. And it's terrible.
But
whole site's complaining about it.
Yeah, it's valuation. It's worth a lot. It's a big, huge, important company, and it's links on a website.
Yeah.
And anyway, they shied, they've probably gone the other extreme where they have no real strong user interface.
Yeah.
But it's just the point being that you can accomplish a lot with just offering value to your customers.
Exactly.
That's great.
So don't be afraid if you can't develop a full solution to to meet all the things that your customers need. You can do it in pieces.
Well, John, thanks for doing this kind of part one. Yeah. I think we can unpack how part two will look like offhand, but great feedback. And I love the real talk. Even showing the little fairy at the beginning, little Zelda.
Like her.
Really, that by default, Joanna's gonna sketch, and I know there's more sketchers out there. So, Professor Clark, thanks for all your feedback. Sunny, Stewart, all the current cohort, Brianna, thanks for coming on, and all the students. I hope you guys did learn a little bit about product. I think the main thing is actually just. I love how Professor Clark just be creative. That initial start is actually, we all have that gift, right? So for there on, Joanna, thank you so much, and I will let everyone go. Thanks for coming on, and
bye everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Joanna, as usual. Amazing.